I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show. Today on the James Altucher Show.
Every time Dave Asprey comes on this podcast, he changes my life, and that's no joke. And this time is no different. Dave, of course, is the founder of Bulletproof Coffee, and he's also the author of several books, including Game Changers and The Bulletproof Diet, and most recently, Fast This Way. Burn fat, heal inflammation, and eat like the high-performing human you were meant to be. In this episode, we talk all about the best practices for fasting and how it can increase your overall health, brain power, longevity, and everything else. And Dave's done the research, lives the life, tells the tale. Here he is. First off, Dave Asprey, you've been on the podcast, I think like 3 or 4 times now. We went on for the Bulletproof Diet. We went on for probably either Superhuman or Game Changers or both of them. And now your latest book, I love this book, Fast This Way, Burn Fat, Heal Inflammation, and Eat Like the High-Performing Human You Were Meant to Be. And I have to say, I think in part due to conversations that we've had over the years, I do regular intermittent fasting, which is what you talk about in this book.
Nice.
But you really put an interesting spin on it and talk about fasting in a lot of different ways, not just food fasting, but other kinds of fasting. And then you talk about the chemical and molecular benefits of fasting. So we're going to discuss all this and how it not only helps you lose weight, but improves and sharpens the brain and leads to longevity and all sorts of other good things. So Dave Asprey, welcome once again to the podcast.
Thanks for having me back on. There's always fun stuff to talk about. You're always doing something new and interesting. I'm like, wow, really? And I could see you being an early adopter of intermittent fasting because, it was part of the Bulletproof Diet. And so I have 10 years of people's data from talking with him and using it. And I first saw keto, that's a part of the Bulletproof Diet where you do it sometimes, but others. Keto went off the deep end where people are like, if you eat another carb, you're a bad person. And I just see it break people over and over if you don't cycle. I know because it broke me before I released the book. That's one of the reasons I wrote that one. And fasting is about to do the same thing. Like, oh, fasting makes me feel good. So if I fasted 16 hours and it worked, if I could just fast for 36 hours every day, then I'll be amazing. That's called starvation. So I'm seeing women first and then men they kind of hit a wall where like, I'm just going to fast more and more and more. And just because something's good doesn't mean even more of it's better. So the idea is, how do you make fasting easy, sustainable for decades without suffering? And that's a different book than the typical fasting book, which is step 1, don't eat for a while. Step 2, it's good for you. Here's the science. Like that's already been done. That wasn't meant to be this book.
Right. Fasting's such an interesting thing because it's a combination of not only understanding nutrition and then the kind of bioscience of the body underneath nutrition, but also it's about habit forming. It's about psychology. It's about anti-aging, because there's a lot of different research results about the connection between fewer calories and anti-aging. And, I'm sure you've read David Sinclair's book, Lifespan, which talks about that, which in your book, Fast This Way, you mentioned the effect fasting has on the NAD plus cells or molecules or whatever. I don't even know. But I know, but that's a big topic for, do you take like NMN or NR, any of those?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I take NMN because that was recommended by Lifespan.
I've used NR and NMN for 10 plus years when the very first study came out. The most clinically studied is the True Niagen, the nicotinamide riboside, but there's intriguing evidence for NMN. So I take that also. And I just got NAD injected this morning. So I also do it intravenously at clinic. So we know your NAD levels decline between like age 0 and age 90 by 90%. If you keep your NAD levels young, you'll actually perform better. So fasting is a way to do that. And there's lots of supplemental ways. I do it all.
So I'm going to ask you, so I want to talk about Fast This Way and fasting in general, because you've really got it down to both an art and a science. But do you think, my suspicion is MNN and all these NAD plus supplements help, and this is going to sound crazy, but help against COVID, because they really started out as anti-diabetes supplements, and diabetes seems to be linked to susceptibility to COVID.
There's some steps in the middle there, but essentially you're onto something. What's happening is anytime your mitochondria do a better job of turning food, which is glucose or ketones, and maybe some amino acids, but usually it's glucose, then ketones, then amino acids, it turns those into energy. And if it does a really good job of that, you have low inflammation and you don't have high blood sugar. If it does a bad job of that, you have high inflammation and high blood sugar because you couldn't use the sugar to make electrons. It's like very obvious when you just think of it, like how good are you at taking this and making that? Well, NAD makes it so your mitochondria work better at converting sugar into electricity to do stuff, right? Whether it's to love or to walk around or just to do something that isn't very smart, like eat a bunch of fried stuff and bad oils in the middle of COVID. But all of it comes from electrons. So if your mitochondria work really well, you'll have less inflammation and you're less likely to have severe symptoms from COVID. And diabetes is just a sign that you have weak mitochondria. And intermittent fasting is a major way to change that. Ketosis for brief cyclical periods of time is a major way to change it, which can happen with fasting, but doesn't have to. And then there's all these supplements that make it work better. Since I was a 300-pound dude with really poor mitochondrial function and all the diseases of aging before I was 30, like I have to get on top of this or I'm probably going to die or have some really bad disease. So I did. And I kind of became an expert at that because I'm a hacker and that's what hackers do.
Yeah. And you, not only that, you turned it into a very successful company. Like we haven't updated in a little bit, but how's, again, before we get into all the nuances of fasting, how's business? How's Bulletproof Coffee? My wife comes to me a few months ago and I think we even exchanged emails then. And she's like, have you heard of this Bulletproof Coffee? I'm going to order a whole bunch. And so we have Bulletproof Coffee all over the place.
I remember that email.
And I'm like, yeah, don't you listen to my podcast? Well. Like Dave Asprey's been on my podcast 5 times. So
I'm always happy when my wife listens to my podcast. She's like, I listened to this episode. It was really good. I'm like, oh, you listen to my podcast? That's so cool. And I hope she didn't listen to that one where I talked about her. But what's happening there with Bulletproof is during the pandemic, a lot of people said, I've got to order stuff online. So I'm going to order stuff that's good for me and that makes me feel full and relaxed. So it's almost like the products are all created so that after you eat them, you feel really full and you have a ton of energy. And so people are saying, I want that energy right now because I'm feeling depleted. So it's still been rough because of COVID, team disruptions and all. So Bulletproof is doing well. And my other companies, the Bulletproof Cafe in LA, where for 6 years, grass-fed, local, properly made food, no seed oils, no bad stuff. Man, it's rough being in the restaurant business right now. And the biohacking conference, we went virtual this year, and I'm still working on making the next in-person one. So there's those things. And 40 years is in, my neurofeedback company is actually doing well, because anytime people are more stressed and you have something that actually gives them more energy, energy is the antidote to stress. It's not just relaxing. It takes energy to relax. And that's why I thought this was the right time for a book on fasting, because if you imagine going to the bank and you walk in and you don't have to withdraw anything, they just hand you some money right away because you walked in the door. And then like, oh, and we're going to give you some more money later today. And then next year we'll give you a return on this investment. You're like, I didn't make an investment. You gave me money up front. Like, yeah, I know. But that's how intermittent fasting is. Because you didn't spend time or energy or money on breakfast, but you had more energy that morning, not less, because you did it right. And then later on, your cells get stronger and you don't get type 2 diabetes, which means you don't get cancer and cardiovascular disease and Alzheimer's and all the other bad stuff that happens, of which diabetes is a major risk factor. So like I didn't have to spend anything now, and everything lines up for this. So the ROI on intermittent fasting is one of the highest you can have, unless you overfast or you're doing it wrong, in which case it makes you stressed.
I think the question people have is, does fasting increase energy? Because on the one hand, you eat food to get energy. On the other hand, you say in this book, fasting correctly will actually increase energy. So maybe we could start there. Like, I think, and by the way, I think most people don't realize, and by most people, I mean me, I just come to the realization that energy is a very nuanced thing. And obviously it's critical to success, but the ways in which we waste energy or conserve it or gain it are not so obvious, really. They're almost so obvious they're cliches, but at the same time they're not obvious. So let's talk about energy and the relationship between that and fasting. I need more energy.
So energy is more obvious than you might think, and you really are run on the same electrons that power your iPhone. And if you have a whole bunch of windows open, a whole bunch of tabs open, the screen's turned up all the way, you're burning your battery more. Or if your battery can't hold a charge very well, your phone doesn't stay charged as long. So it's all a question of how quickly can you charge, how long can you stay charged, and how much do you waste? Inflammation is a waste of energy. And when you have a ton of energy, you feel great. And when you don't have a ton of energy, you might feel anxious or tired or lethargic or depressed or all these different things. But ultimately, it all comes down to energy, which is why my metric for everything that I do, whether it's what I put on my plate, for everything I choose, how much energy did it take? I don't measure it in time or money. It's how much energy was it? And then it's time, and then it's money. Because if you have no energy, you'll just sleep during the time you have. And if you have no energy and you have some money, you'll spend all your money to get your energy back, because energy is the most precious, right? So it's how much do you invest and how much energy do you get back, right? Because if you have enough energy, you can always make time or you can make money. But if you have no energy, you're screwed. So biologically, here's why fasting, if you don't overfast and you do it the right way, why it gives you more energy. And there's 3 components to this. And why don't I start with the hardest one first?
Okay.
It'll make sense, but the other 2 are easy. Okay. There's an algorithm for all life forms on Earth. And this comes, my concentration in my undergrad degree was in artificial intelligence, or at least a branch of it. And my whole career in Silicon Valley was complex systems and behaviors and stuff. So let's pretend you're God and you want to make a single-celled life form. It's very dumb. It can only do a few things. It doesn't have a brain. It can't really sense very much. So the first thing it has to do is not get eaten. So that's fear. Run away from, kill, or hide from something that might be scary. And you have to do this with all of your energy, 10 times focus. Okay. That's the first step. Otherwise, you'd just be eaten, and the life form you'd create in this little sim universe we're making would be useless. The second thing the life form has to do, the first one's fear. The second one is feed. Why? Because famines kill most life over the course of the last 2 billion years. And this is why there's a voice in your head that says, eat everything. Because all life will eat everything that's available in front of it, because it's a survival thing. So 10 times energy on fear, 5 times energy on food compared to what it actually requires.
Sorry, just to back up a second.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say 10 times energy, 5 times energy, what are you multiplying? What's going on?
When I say
there?
energy, it's focus. And if there is something that your automated threat detection system that is not your thinking, if it determines something's a threat, it will immediately change your energy production throughout the entire body to help you respond to the threat so that you'll survive. It'll take over.
So when there's fear, your body needs to do 10x the energy for a focused amount of time.
Well, it'll put 10 times the focus on it. It might not actually be 10 times the number of electrons used. But for instance, the number one fear of people in the US is not snakes on a plane, it's public speaking. So most people, you tell them, I'm going to put you on stage in 5 minutes. And literally, if you measure the energy production, they start sweating, they start shaking, like their blood flow changes, their eyes dilate, and the body is like getting ready to fight. And it's putting all of the energy that should have gone into folding proteins and preparing the body or planning for the future. All of that stops, and it's like straight on amygdala, like, okay, right? And that is what's happening in our brain all the time, and it's happening in our body. If it might be a threat, then respond as if it's a threat and stop doing everything else. And when there's not too much of a threat, then, okay, what about food? I got to make sure that there's more food. Okay, this is not our conscious thinking at all. This is what a bacteria does in a petri dish. These same things. Oh, there's a threat, and the threat might be ultraviolet light. It doesn't really matter. It goes, oh, let me make a bunch of toxic chemicals because that's how I process fear if I'm a bacteria, right? Or if you're a cactus, I'm going to make extra spines if I'm in a threatening environment. And if I'm in a non-threatening environment, I make less spines because I put my energy into something that's not fear, right? So then we go to food. There's a third thing. You're designing life to live forever on Earth. They're all F words. So we have fear, we have food. What's the other F word that all life has to do to stay around forever?
Fucking.
Oh, dude. I was going for fertility, but if you just want to go for the F word, man, I'm going to respect that.
Well, that's the precursor for fertility.
Exactly. But here's the deal. You're going to put about 3 times more focus on that than it really needs. Because there is a voice inside your body. It is the voice of a quadrillion ancient bacteria running your systems right now, saying if you don't have sex relatively frequently, the earth will end. Because from the perspective of a dumb little bacteria, if you don't reproduce the species will go extinct because they're too dumb to know that there's billions of us around there and that that's not a threat. So we're smart enough to, oh yeah, there's a taco coming later, it doesn't matter. But they're pulling the energy strings because they make the energy, but they also are the first line threat detectors. So what's going on here? Why does fasting give you more energy? Well, in Fast This Way, one of the studies, 15% of the average person's thoughts every day are about what's for their next meal. Now, if you can manipulate your hunger hormones via fasting, via some of the hacks in here, so that there is no voice in your head making you think about food, you got 15% of your energy back. 15% of your thoughts return to functionality instead of thinking about tacos. That blows me away, right? The implication, though, is why I went and I fasted in a cave for 4 days, James. Actually, I didn't even finish the first part. So we were talking about energy from fasting. Then I'll talk about the big fear word. So with fasting, you got energy back because you're not thinking about food, because when you fast properly, it actually turns off the hunger hormones. It doesn't leave you hungry. And the second thing fasting does, you take a percentage of the energy production of your body and you turn it towards what's in your stomach. And you start chewing on the food. And it takes energy to chew on food. And I say chew, you're enzymatically breaking it down, but you've got to make lipase and you've got to make all these enzymes and you got to move it through the body. And it's actually work. And when your body's working on food, it is not working on cleaning up your cells. It's not working on thinking. So a portion of your energy goes to what's in the gut, right? And that's kind of cool. So now we saved 15% of our thoughts or more. We saved all the energy that was going to go into digestion. And fasting, even an intermittent fast every other day, 3 days a week, will raise ketone levels in the body. When your body burns ketones and glucose, or instead of glucose, ketones have more electrons in them than glucose does. So you're like, okay, well, let me get this straight. I wasted less energy thinking about food. I wasted less energy digesting food. And I made more energy from burning fat than I would have if I was burning carbs from food, because I'm burning my own fat or I'm burning some MCTs that you can have during a fast. Either way, you've just got 3 more things going on.
Is it because burning fat releases more ketones?
Eating fat that you can burn for energy turns the fat into ketones. It's just the simple idea that calories are a unit of energy. So calories are not bad. And when you burn a ketone, you get 2 more electrons than when you burn sugar. So ketones are more energetically dense because fat's more energetically dense. So when your body gets those, it's like, yeah, it's almost you go to the gas station, you put in your 97 octane racing gas and your car runs really well, and you put in the 92 octane crappy gas and your car sort of sputters. There's actually more energy that's available from ketones. And the part of your brain, the neurons, in studies, they'll actually use all the ketones present before they'll touch glucose. because they love it. They're crying out for energy. Your neurons have 15,000 mitochondrial little power plants in them. Your average cells have a few hundred. So these are like the energy burning rock stars of the brain, and they're starving for energy. So you're fasting. They're like, oh, I have to think about less crap. I had less stuff going on digestive wise, so I had more energy. And you gave me high energy fuel all at the same time. Like, this is the best morning ever. That's why it works.
Let me ask a couple of questions, because why then did the body evolve to basically, I mean, we get most of our energy in life, almost everybody gets most of their energy in life from burning glucose. Hardly anybody thinks about, oh, I need to burn more ketones. So why aren't we naturally set up to burn ketones from food instead of glucose?
We are naturally set up to burn ketones from food or to burn ketones from our body. We're simply set up to be lazy and to not die. Now, remember, you could put on your God hat in your little sim game again. You want to build a bacteria that thrives or a bacteria that will live forever. So humans can eat all sorts of crap and survive, but I'm not interested in that. I want to know what should I eat when in order to thrive. Mother Nature doesn't care much about thriving. It is don't die, keep the species alive. That means you can eat grains, you can eat snails if you need to, you can eat all sorts of stuff. And it's probably not the best food, but it's better than dying, right? And glucose is broadly available.
So I guess the key is very broadly and naively, I'm going to say eat the minimum amount possible so you're not wasting energy eating crap, but eat the foods that end up giving you more energy than you otherwise would have gotten eating a normal American diet.
That is almost entirely true. It's 100% known that a major caloric surplus, in other words, eating way too much, is inflammatory and bad for you. You don't need to do it. The minimum possible amount of food, even if it's high energy foods that you can eat, it's not a good life. I have a few friends who for years, like 20 years, have been eating a third less calories than they actually need because they read some studies about life extension. And they're very thin, very cold, and they're hungry all the time. And they say, well, I just got used to being hungry all the time. And I know I'm going to live longer. But I'm like, man, that's not much of a life. So you don't need to go there. And one of the risks of fasting is that you could go there because you really have so much control over your hunger. You just stop worrying about food. And worry is an interesting word because worry is fear. And what I had going on when I was fat was this weird dynamic. People had told me, Dave, if you don't eat 6 times a day, your body will go into starvation mode and then you'll get fatter. And I'm like, I'm 300 pounds. I don't want to get fatter. I'll do anything to not get fatter. I'll eat 6 times a day. I'll eat 10 times a day. I don't care. Like, I just don't want to be fat. I went to the gym an hour and a half a day, 6 days a week to try and fix the problem. It didn't work, but I was willing to do it. So what's happening with worry there is partly starvation worry. So now we take it from 5 times focus of fear to 5 times focus for food to 10 times focus on starvation and dying of lack of food. And this is why when people say, I'm starving, I got to go get lunch. Your body actually believes you're starving. Your brain knows it's going to take me 2 to 3 months to starve to death. I could go a week without food. It would suck, but it's not harmful. But man, the body does not like that message even a little bit. And that is why when people think about fasting, it triggers a fear response. The other reason, in my case, is that there's a word that I love, and it's hypoglycemia. And or hangry is the other version of it. When I weighed 300 pounds, if I got hungry, I was a jerk. I think I was a jerk even when I wasn't hungry. But I was a really big jerk when I was hungry. So now I'm getting to think, man, if I don't have a constant stream of food, not only am I going to get fatter, because then I might go into starvation mode if I don't have it, so I could die, and I'm going to act like a jerk. So I was literally afraid on multiple levels. And that takes it out of just hunger into anxiety. So I hired a shaman to drop me off in a cave for 4 days with no food and no people anywhere for 10 miles in any direction. So I could face that, and I could, really sit with it. And if I was really hungry, I wanted to go lick the wall. There's nothing to eat there. And that's a relatively radical way to approach it. But I wanted to get on top of the fear that was tied to food. And that's the other reason I wrote Fast This Way. It's not that hard to say don't eat. The problem is most people will never try it because of that process I just walked you through around, but I would die. I would starve. I would act like a jerk. I'd be so tired. I couldn't do it. None of those are actually true unless you don't know how to do it. At which point, if when I weighed 300 pounds, you said, Dave, have water for breakfast, I would have not been able to do my job. So we're sitting here, James, and we have millions of people listening, and many of them, there's kids running around. They're trying to focus on their job. They're doing all kinds of stuff. They're not going to want to be low energy, cold, shaky, hungry, and unfocused when they're trying to handle way more than they had to handle a year ago or 2 years ago. So how do we make it so fasting is safe and it's convenient and it's doable for decades without it becoming harmful? And that's a much harder problem than just don't eat for a while. It's good for you.
And it has to have a net increase in energy. So you've described kind of the path we're going to get there, which is, well, at the very least, you're reducing spending energy by thinking less about food. Your body spends less energy on digestion. You don't have certain worries related to either starvation or eating too much or whatever. And you're potentially burning more energy because fat allows you to be burning ketones rather than kind of less energy dense glucose. So, but
Correct.
the food itself also needs to provide energy. So when you implied, for instance, fried foods, no good because there's probably a lot more just non-energy molecules in fried foods than in vegetables, for instance.
Well, when we look at calories, we have these. There's actually not that many calories in, calories out people left because most of them died early of Alzheimer's or diabetes or something. But there are still a few researchers who say, oh, it's just about calories. And that is a mean-spirited, false statement. And I believed it, and many heavy people believe it now, which puts all of it on willpower, which doesn't work. Here's how you can prove that it's not just about calories or energy from food. I live on a small organic farm. We raise sheep, we raise pigs, we raise chickens. And I've done the research in agriculture. If you are eating industrial meat, what they do, they'll take a cow, they'll put a little pellet, a waxy pellet in the cow's ear. This is a concentrated mold toxin that's 1,000 times more estrogenic than estrogen. When they put that in the cow's ear, it'll soak into the fatty membranes throughout the cow, and that cow will get fat on 1/3 less calories. And they actually measure caloric efficiently. How is it that different calories could be more efficient than others in cows, but not in people? Okay, since we have massive data, very quantified, they weigh the animals, they do all this, how much food did they eat? Well, different foods do different things to us. So if you want to fast without being hungry, the trick is, what did you eat in your last meal? And there are 5 big classes of food toxins that trigger cravings. And what you find when you embark on an intermittent fasting journey is that, normally I'm not really hungry. But then some mornings you wake up and you're ravenous. Like, what is going on? Like, I'm so hungry. I'm just thinking about food all the time. You did something to cause that, right? Maybe you just got a really bad night's sleep. But most likely you ate something the night before that messed up your energy production. So your body is low on energy because you gummed it up. In the case of fried foods, you're getting omega-6 oils, which are toxic. I've been encouraging people to avoid those since my first blog post in 2010. It's like, guys, this type of oil that's abundant at restaurants and in our society is bad for you. And the less of it you eat, the better you'll perform.
I'm curious if there's a definitive comparison. Like, okay, if you eat a bunch of French fries as opposed to a plate of beets or Brussels or whatever vegetable is good, what's the difference in energy? Like, well, if I eat French fries, will the next morning I have brain fog as opposed to if I eat the Brussels sprouts? Or what's a good comparison in that sense?
Well, it turns out the French fries have more energy because if you just look at the number of calories in there, they're full of oil and they're full of starch. So technically, if you're a calories in, calories out person, those are higher energy. However, when you eat these omega-6 oils, canola oil, soybean oil, corn oil, safflower, all the nut and seed oils that are cheap and abundant, those oils, when they're fried, they're damaged and they go into the body and they make free radicals. Now, what a free radical is an electron that should have gone into a thought or an action that instead went into inflammation. So what they do is they lower your cell's ability to make energy efficiently. And this is the really evil part. The body's energy production things, the mitochondria and your cell membranes, are made out of tiny droplets of fat. So the body's like, you just gave me a whole bunch of this inflammatory damaged fat. So I'm trying to burn it. I'm making a lot of free radicals. It's like one of those rolling coal trucks. So there's lots of waste coming out of it. And then it gets worse because it tries to make batteries out of these damaged fats. And all of a sudden now the batteries that are made as this fat gets incorporated into your tissues, they're low power batteries. They're the Tesla with the cheapest battery pack, not the biggest battery pack. So you get a short-term hit from free radicals and you get a long-term hit. So if you eat the fried stuff, you're going to be hungry the next morning because of all this excessive pollution in the body. And studies show the inflammation that happens from a plate of French fries cooked at a restaurant and that used oil they've been using for a long time, it creates way more inflammation for longer in the body than just smoking a cigarette, which is also very bad for you. So if you give me a choice between a plate of restaurant French fries and a cigarette, I would reluctantly choose the cigarette, but I would fast from both because that's better.
And what about a comparison? So let's say there's the James who has French fries, and in an alternative universe, there's the James who has a plate of vegetables. Okay. The next morning, how are the two Jameses feeling?
Well, the French fry James is going to feel worse. But if you ate just a plate of steamed Brussels sprouts, you're also going to feel really hungry. Because the body's going to eat that and go, you idiot, there's no energy in here. A plate of Brussels sprouts might have 100 calories, and it's going to probably take as much energy to digest those Brussels sprouts as was in them. So now you've also triggered a craving because you just didn't eat enough energy. Now, if you had to put a bunch of grass-fed butter on those things, you'd probably feel fine in the morning. And if you'd thrown a little bit of grass-fed steak or hamburger or a pastured egg on them and had some protein and more saturated fat in that egg yolk or that meat, you would actually feel incredibly full, satisfied, and dialed in. So it's really a question of, do you know how to eat before you fast? And if you get a craving during a fast, do you use your willpower to muscle through it and win sometimes, and the other times the donuts in front of you win? Or do you have tools that you can use during a fast to turn off hunger and cravings so you don't get distracted? And that's the tricky part. And that's where I've pissed off some of the hair shirt fasters for sure with this book. You know what hair shirts are?
No.
Man, maybe it just sticks in my head because I'm weird. So I studied religious studies in my undergrad as well. I was one class away from getting a little concentration in that. And there's a sect of, I think they were Catholic monks in the 14th century. And they would weave shirts out of human hair. And they did this because it was super itchy. It was the itchiest shirt they could manufacture. It's much worse than wool. And they would do this and they wear the shirts because suffering is good for you and it reminds you of what a bad person you are. So they do it and then they would like self-flagellate, like hit themselves with whips and stuff like that. Well, you can choose to be a hair shirt faster where I'm going to fast in the way that causes me suffering because I'm tough. Or you could say, I had stuff to do. I want to take care of my family. I wanted to do my job. I didn't want to yell at people. So I am going to, in the middle of my fast, do things that allow me to get the benefits of the fast without having to suffer. And that's the 3 big fasting hacks in the book. So I tell you when to have dinner so that you have an easier fast the next day. I tell you what to have when you eat so that you're less likely to have cravings. And basically, you avoid 5 buckets of things and 3 things to do during a fast so that if you're getting either low energy, tired, cravings, you can stop them, but still continue the fast and get the metabolic benefits. You do that for a while, you get stronger and stronger and stronger at fasting, and life gets better.
So I'm planning my dinner and I'm planning to intermittent fast the next day. Let's say I haven't even had a meal yet today. I'm having a fairly early dinner so I can get a good sleep tonight.
Good for you. Dinner at 5 or 6 will change your life instead of dinner at 7 or 8. It's a huge improvement in circadian timing.
Yeah, my own intermittent fasting is basically involves something like, bulletproof coffee or the equivalent in the morning, and then an early dinner, and that's about it when I'm doing intermittent fasting.
You're doing it right, man. You will live longer and feel better on that regimen. And people who start paying attention to how they feel oftentimes end up there. The ideal time to eat, if you don't care about social norms, is 2 p.m. But almost no one does that, so eat at 5 or 6. That's close enough. Right, because practicality matters.
Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. I've had a lot of guests on who talk about dieting and anti-aging. Everyone has different opinions about different foods. Like somebody will say, this food is the best you could eat. And then another person says, no, that's the worst food you can eat. And, on and on. The problem with doing a podcast with a lot of people who talk about nutrition is that you have 5 nutritionists in a room. They have 6 different opinions about broccoli. So what should we do? And even in your book, there's lots of information about food, and it's hard to navigate through to see what's the best to eat when, even though you are concrete.
Yeah, any nutritionist who says kale is good for you is wrong. Okay, that's the first thing you need to know, because kale's gross, and things that gross can't be good for you. It's a law.
I agree. Thank God you said that. Like that and wheatgrass are the worst.
Totally, I'm with you. Now, here's why the nutritionists are confused. And by the way, I'm talking about nutritionists. If they're dietitians, the vast majority of dietitians are responsible for giving you NutraSweet Jell-O in hospitals and cornflakes. So if it's a dietitian, sorry guys, you need to get another life. And there are a few functional dietitians, and you guys are excused from what I just said. But the typical ones who like newspapers will call to say, you should have a balanced diet of corn syrup and whatever. No, that is not what we're talking about. So we're going to toss those guys out of the conversation. It's that these 5 buckets of things that cause cravings, some of them are universal. I don't think most people are going to argue that corn syrup and margarine are good for you. Like we pretty much know those are out. But if 1/3 of the population is sensitive to something, and for them it causes severe cravings and inflammation, but 2/3 of the population is good for them, until we sort that out, it's really hard to do this. So what I've done in Fast This Way, I said, all right, here's the 5 buckets of things that are likely to cause cravings, and they might not for you. For instance, you said beets or Brussels sprouts. Now, beets are relatively high in oxalic acid, which is one of the 5 big categories of toxins. It's the thing that's high in kale and raw spinach. It is generally not good for anyone to eat high amounts of oxalate, but some people handle it better than others. A lot of people are eating, especially raw beets, and they're saying, oh, this is great. I just did this beet juice smoothie. Well, here's the problem. It's going to give you kidney stones. It's going to cause little crystals of oxalic acid when it meets calcium in your blood. They travel around. They get in your brain. They get in your vulva if you're so equipped. They get in your joints. They give you sore feet, and they make you stiff in the morning. Or maybe you have really good gut bacteria. You can handle more beet juice than I can. I'll tell you, if I eat a plate of beets, I'm sensitive both because of that, and I have something called the NOS3 gene, which means that I'm more likely to make the wrong kind of nitric oxide from those beets. They wouldn't be good for me, and they would cause cravings. But if you love beets and you are totally satisfied and full when you have beets with some fat on them, they're not a problem food for you. So it's this idea of, are they good or bad? No, they're just food for some people, but they're not compatible with others. But if you believe that beets and kale are God's food and you must eat those the way I did when I was a raw vegan, you're going to be hungry all the time, and your fasting is going to be painful. And when you just realize you have permission to just say, those don't work for me. Another one of the 5 categories, we talked about omega-6 oils already. Those are bad for everyone. And sometimes, especially if you're vegan, you're like, but that can't be. but it is. Like your body is not made out of plant fats. Your body is made out of animal fats, and it's hard to make animal fats out of plant fats. So you get disturbed fatty acid metabolism if you only eat plants. And I was a raw vegan for a long time. I get it. So another one of the things that messes with everyone over time is phytates or phytic acid. And this is when you follow the 1980s advice, you should always eat whole grains. Well, here's how a typical nutritionist, especially an old school one, will think. Food has calories. Because calories make you fat, calories are bad. Okay. Calories give you energy. They don't make you fat if they're the right calories and you eat the right stuff. So calories are necessary for life. They measure energy. So they'll say, eat foods with less calories. That's going to make you hungry because it had less energy and you have hunger to get energy. But they'll tell you to do that. That's why the plate of Brussels sprouts with no butter is not going to make you feel good. Then they'll say, and what good stuff is in there? Oh, a whole grain. It has fiber. Fiber, good. Now, they never talk about the bad stuff that's in them because it's not in the universe of common nutrition. So you could literally go to one of these people with this algorithm for thinking and say, I have a bowl. It's a bowl of cyanide, but I put a vitamin capsule on top. And they go, how many calories are in there? And you're like, there's 20. And like, how many nutrients? Oh, there's a lot. Great, it's nutrient dense. You should eat it. Because they don't ever look for poison or toxins. But in the plant world, and even in the meat world, everything is a mix of energy, good stuff, and bad stuff. And the bad stuff isn't equally bad for everyone. And what that means, you find the stuff that's the worst for you and you cut it out of your life and you just have magic levels of energy. And I'm one of those lucky people where I probably have more of that than average given my health background. And I've been able to dial in on the research and figure it out. So one of these things is phytic acid. What it does in whole grains is it binds to the minerals your body needs to live. And plants do this. Remember that F word, fear? Run away from, kill, or hide from scary things. I'm wheat. I can't run away because I have roots. How do I kill scary things that are eating my babies? Well, I cover my babies in poison. And the smart humans strip off the poison and eat the guts. And the humans who forgot about poisons, they just eat the outside with all the poison in it. And then they can't absorb zinc and iron and magnesium and boron and silica and all the other things that our bodies need. So for every gram of plant-based protein that has phytates in it, you need another gram of animal-based protein to overcome the phytic acid. So if you're doing a lot of that stuff, you're going to be hungry the next morning. So wow, who would have thought? So that's another category, right? And we go down the list in the book. There's, let's see, from memory, I've been talking about this so much in interviews that
you talk about lectins.
Going back to see which ones I've talked about. Lectins, thank you. I knew I was missing a big one. So in 2010, my first blog post was like, guys, lectins are one of these weird things in foods and they mess with some people. And it turns out the nightshade family, which is bell peppers, tomatoes, potatoes, and spicy peppers, including jalapenos, which makes me very sad. I grew up in New Mexico eating green chili. I grew up with chronic musculoskeletal pain. That's why I had arthritis in my knees when I was 14. I'm one of the 1/3 of people who has a direct, it's not even an allergy response, it's a genetic response where the polysaccharide sugar coating on my cells is a direct match for bell peppers or anyone of that family. So when I eat those proteins stick to my cartilage and they cause inflammation and pain. But if you have slightly differently configured sugar molecules on your cartilage, you don't have the problem. So lectins are made in your body. You make more than 1,000 different forms of these every day. They're not all bad, but there are some that are triggers for many, many people. And over the last 10 years, there's been more discussion about lectins. They're one of the big things in the Bulletproof diet and in Fast This Way. You may be totally fine. You can eat mashed potatoes and they don't mess with you at all. But if they do mess with you, you eat them and the next morning, your neck is sore, your joints are sore, and you're hungry. Well, there you go. They're not compatible with you. But they weren't good or bad. They either work or they don't work. And that's where a lot of nutrition, we want to be dogmatic. We're like, this is bad for everyone. And when people go to fastthisway.com, there's a roadmap, which is basically all the foods you can eat, stack ranked. These ones don't mess with almost anyone. These ones mess with everyone. The ones in the middle, they're suspect. And you need to find out, just acknowledge these may cause cravings, they may not cause cravings. And once you give yourself freedom to, oh, you know what, that didn't work for me. And it wasn't just random, it was caused. That's awesome. And that is free, that download.
One issue might be that, let's say every day you eat McDonald's. In your stomach, your gut will basically grow bacteria that is addicted to McDonald's food. So when you first try to cut it out of your diet, this gut bacteria is like, what the hell's going on? And because there's a lot of, neuron, serotonin, whatever in your gut, you'll feel these cravings for several weeks while the gut bacteria is still alive. Like, how do you know when you've gone past the stage where, it's very difficult to survive that stage where you have these enormous cravings for what you've already been eating because your bacteria is all set up for it?
It's actually pretty easy to get past that if you know the tricks. Here's what's going on there. You're correct. Your gut bacteria are looking for stuff. Now, it all goes back to fear. Life is very consistent. Now, the bacteria in your gut are saying we're used to getting our daily shovel of bad fats and our daily shovel of corn syrup. And what else is in there? Maybe a little bit of potato and some industrial meat with antibiotic residues. So they're sitting there and it doesn't come today. And they freak out. Now, they can't really run away, their bacteria. They can't really hide because they're in your gut. So what are they going to do? They're going to kill. And the way they kill is they make something called lipopolysaccharide, which is a well-known bacterial toxin. It's called an endotoxin because it's made inside your body, ENDO toxin. And lipopolysaccharides are something that cross the gut barrier, especially if you eat like stuff that's not compatible with you, because then you'll actually have a weak gut barrier. And then this lipopolysaccharide just walks right through, gets in your circulation, goes to your brain. It turns down energy production in the brain and turns up inflammation and turns up anxiety. And you feel like crap, and then you want to make it go away. So then you eat the McNuggets. Well, what if there was a way to stop the lipopolysaccharide from these angry bacteria from getting to your brain? There is. And it's a supplement that's been used for 10,000 years by humans. And I recommend in the book that you might want to consider this.
Flintstone vitamins?
Flintstone, it was gummy bears. You're right. It's activated charcoal. And activated charcoal is a unique molecule. It's made from ideally coconut shells. That's the stuff that I manufacture. But there are many brands. Like I said, it's been used for 10,000 years. You go to India, they sell it on street corners for any kind of digestive distress. But when you're fasting, or frankly, when you eat junk food, you take charcoal with it, it'll stick to the bad stuff your gut bacteria make so that it doesn't harm you. And your cravings go way down, like really seriously down. So when people start fasting their first day, you know what? You might want to have a bottle of activated charcoal nearby. And you take it on an empty stomach, it'll absorb pharmaceuticals, it'll absorb toxins, it'll absorb some heavy metals, pesticides, all that stuff, but especially lipopolysaccharide. So you take it when you have a craving or take it before you have a craving. And magically, the cravings don't happen nearly as much. But you still may be low on energy because your cells are used to getting glucose all the time. They're weak. Your power plants can be configured to either take sugar in or to take fat in or to do both. If you're a highly resilient human or animal, you can do both. But since you're probably configured to do glucose, the body's like, oh man, do you know how much work it's going to be to go through a quadrillion mitochondria and teach them all to eat fat and sugar? Like that's a lot. That's too much work. I'm just going to give you some cravings because I don't want to do the work. And by the way, for me to do that, I'm going to need extra energy. Could you have a Snickers bar? Right? Well, that's where the three things you do during a fast to make the fast livable come in, so that magically you have enough energy to reconfigure the body and teach it that it will always have fat available. Therefore, it must always be able to burn fat. And you want to go through those 3 hacks to make fast not hurt?
Yes.
Okay. The first one in the book is black coffee. Now, that alone is offensive to the hair shirt water only fasting crowd that says you have to only have water because that's what the mice had in the study we did in 1984 or whenever the studies are. And water fasting, if you're dying of cancer, you might want to do it. You need to be medically supervised for longer fasts. And this is combined with rest, relaxation, meditation. You're on a couch. It's a spiritual fast and a cleansing fast, but it's not a working fast. So you're doing a working fast. You have black coffee. Why black coffee? Because I sell it. No, it won't change my life. If everyone listening buys coffee from me or doesn't, Bulletproof is doing very well, like we talked about. Black coffee is magic. And here's why. This study didn't come out when I first launched Bulletproof Coffee. It came out, I think, about 6 years ago from the University of California at San Diego. And they found that the amount of caffeine in 2 small cups of coffee doubles ketone production. So you wake up in the morning, you're going to have a very small amount of ketones because you probably were asleep for 8 hours, let's hope. And you didn't have a snack after dinner, let's hope. So you might have already gone 4 hours after dinner, 8 hours. Hey, you're already 12 hours into a fast. What do you know? That wasn't so hard. But so there might be trace amounts of ketones forming. Well, the caffeine helps form ketones. It also directly is a hunger suppressant and it gives you more energy and it turns off cravings. So that's an easy thing to do, and it's totally fine to do that during a fast. And bonus points if you get coffee without mold in it, because mold will cause cravings. So if you drink a cup of coffee and an hour later you really want sugar, you're tired, you want to punch people, it wasn't the coffee, it was what was in the coffee that grew on the coffee while it was fermenting. That's a whole different story, but mycotoxins are one of the classes of things that cause cravings. So foods that aren't fresh can oftentimes cause cravings. Even leftovers sometimes cause massive cravings from histamine, which is another one of the big categories of things that cause cravings. So we're going through black coffee, and that's the first thing. And that's kind of a level 1. Do that during a fast, and it's just easier. Level 2 is bulletproof coffee. And you don't have to put tons of butter in it. You can put even a half a teaspoon of butter. And this is new science. It's been driving me nuts for 10 plus years. Actually, 2004 until now. How many years is that? 17 years since I first had yak butter tea. If you were smart, you would just take a bite of butter and drink up a cup of coffee and it'd be faster. But if you don't blend it, it doesn't work. And as an engineer science guy, that pisses me off. So I wrote a $50,000 check to the University of Washington to study basic water chemistry. This was not a bulletproof, test bulletproof coffee at all. They didn't test coffee. They just tested fat and water. And what they found is that butter, grass-fed butter fat, but the oil in butter, and it has to be grass-fed because that changes the type of oil in the butter. You either get seed oil in your butter if the cow ate corn and soy, or if they eat grass, you get saturated fats that your body wants. It forms the largest exclusion zone in water that he's seen, and MCT oil forms it as well. What exclusion zone water is water with different viscosity. So when you and I drink a glass of water, the body disperses the water in the tissues, puts it up against cell membranes, which are made of tiny droplets of fat, and then it heats up the water with 1200 nanometer light. It's called body heat. And when it heats up the water near fat, the water changes into something called the fourth phase of water. After it's been changed from bulk water into this fourth phase exclusion zone water, then your body can use it to make ATP, use it to burn sugar, to burn fat, to fold proteins, and to do the things that happen inside cells. And, well, if you use your blender to change the water in the coffee by putting even a small amount of butter in there, when you drink the coffee, the water from the coffee can actually be used directly to make energy without having to be heated up first. So if you wanted to get energy quickly to burn the fat that's in your body or to burn whatever MCT oil that you also put in there, which directly turns into ketones in the body, well, what you end up with is the ability to turn energy on more rapidly during a fast. So you feel good and you don't have cravings, but you did not raise your insulin at all, and you did not raise your levels of something called mTOR, which is a compound that is raised when you eat protein. So since you had no protein, you had no carbs, you're getting the metabolic benefits of the fast, but you just turned off hunger. And I can say this with assuredness now, after 10 years of talking about the Bulletproof diet, people have lost more than 1 million pounds. It is something that we know works. Intermittent fasting with Bulletproof Coffee has enough time for us. In fact, if you look at comments on this podcast, you'll see a lot of people saying, I do it, you do it, right? So we know that does have an effect. And the third thing that has never been written about in the world of fasting that needs to be a part of this is called prebiotic fiber. Now, prebiotic fiber is not like Metamucil or sawdust. This is fiber that your body cannot digest. It doesn't raise insulin. It has no protein. So your body doesn't really see it as food. But your gut bacteria, the good guys, they see it and like, yeah. So you grow more of the good gut bacteria that thin people have. And they turn this into something called butyric acid, which is a short chain fatty acid that is also ketogenic. So what you just did when you're on your first day going, there's no way, I weigh 300 pounds. I know I'm going to get hangry. It's going to be the worst morning ever. Well, soluble fiber makes you live longer, or prebiotic fiber. And there's hundreds of studies I referenced in my anti-aging book about that.
Well, what's the best way to consume prebiotic fiber?
You pretty much have to buy it. And there's different formulations out there. They all say prebiotic fiber on them. Mine is called Inner Fuel from Bulletproof. And the 3 ingredients that I use are the ones that have the most evidence behind them. One is acacia gum. It's tree sap from Africa that feeds good gut bacteria that your body can't eat. The second ingredient is larch arabenogalactan. Like I said, just Google the ingredients list on Inner Fuel if you want to. Larch arabenogalactan is another tree sap. And the other one is hydrolyzed guar gum, where we enzymatically break down another kind of resin from a tree. And these are things that your body can eat, but the gut bacteria go nuts. and they go nuts in a good way. I quadrupled the number of species of beneficial bacteria in my gut using those 3 compounds. You can use those safely during a fast, unless you're fasting to starve out your gut bacteria. And some types of gut fasts, especially water fasts, are there because there's something really wrong in your gut and you just want nothing that bacteria can eat, so that that's the kind of where you lay on a couch for a week and you drink water. If you're not doing that kind of fasting, you just wanted a stronger metabolism and you wanted more energy this morning, those 3 things will decimate hunger. I don't know anyone who can have that in the morning and then think about eating a donut at 10. You just don't want it. It's relatively low calorie. There might be 100, maybe 130 calories, depending on how much of different ingredients you use. But these are calories that the body only sees as energy without turning on all the digestion mechanisms that are the problem with eating. And the hallmark of fasting is you didn't have any protein, you didn't have any carbs.
What's the deal with protein? Like, you talk about this in the book, and it almost makes protein seem like a negative thing when we're trained all our lives that protein's the best thing. What's up with protein?
Well, it's funny. I'm a huge fan of protein. I just want protein when I'm eating, and I don't want protein when I'm not eating. So when you eat protein, it raises something called mTOR. And mTOR is a signaling molecule in the body that says grow. And you might say, this is great. I want stuff to grow. The problem is that if you have grow mode on all the time, it's pro-inflammatory, and it also grows breast cancer, prostate cancer, and all the other kinds of cancer. So if you eat meat 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day, or even high protein that often, what you end up with is chronically elevated grow mode. Now, if you have no meat and you go all vegan, you're chronically low mTOR, which means you're vulnerable as you age to hip fracture. You have a smaller hippocampus. You didn't get enough growth. So the trick to living a long time and having higher energy is to have low mTOR, which happens when you fast, and then when you eat, to spike it really high. And mTOR works like a spring. You smash it down, and there's 3 things that smash mTOR down. And the harder you smash it, the higher it rebounds. When it rebounds, you put muscle on. So 3 things that suppress it. Number 1 is fasting. Number 2 is coffee. Number 3 is exercise. So in the book, there's a chapter on fasting and exercise, how to combine them to get the most benefits. Well, here's what you do. It's really cool. You skip breakfast. You work out for 10 minutes. Do some squats, do some push-ups. It doesn't have to be crazy, but do them pretty aggressively, right? And now you've pushed mTOR down all 3 ways, and then eat your protein. And the protein's good for you. But if you trickle it in all morning long, you're going to be chronically elevated. You want to get swole, you do eat more protein more often, but the downside of that is chronic inflammation and increased all-cause mortality. You can be carnivore and bulletproof, by the way. There's lots of people now are talking about grass-fed only. I'm like, great. I like, if it's not grass-fed, don't eat it in my plans. But most people handle low inflammation plants and grass-fed meat and similar fats like butter, as well as grass-fed meat. But they're very much in alignment. The problem with a carnivore-only diet can be gut bacteria disruption, which is why the soluble fiber can be really beneficial. In the carnivore side, there's some very aggressive people who will say, that can't be so. I think the preponderance of evidence is behind what I'm saying here, where it may be very beneficial to eat only protein when you eat, or in the case of carnivore, protein and fat. You want to have more fat. And when you eat protein, you always want to have some collagen protein present. Now, do I sell collagen? Yes. Am I the guy who made collagen famous? Yes. The reason collagen is important, it's a connective tissue that you normally don't eat. It's in the gristle, it's in the joints, it's in the ears, and it's generally the chicken feet, stuff we don't want to eat. So that's why I make a flavorless collagen protein. And I say, yeah, when you have it at lunch, you can put it in your coffee. If you don't want to intermittent fast, put it in your coffee at breakfast. Now you've had protein and fat for breakfast. It was still easy. And collagen has amino acids that cancel out some of the negative effects of getting too much animal protein, which is why anyone who's doing a carnivore diet or anyone who's read the Bulletproof diet knows to tail. You want to eat as many parts of the animal as you can. I just don't like liver, right? And I don't like chewing on chicken legs. So I'll take my collagen powdered and I'll take my liver in pills. But generally speaking, if you eat the whole animal, you're healthier. You don't have to do that to fast. The point of fasting is timing and amount. But if you want to really dial in on what works best, protein's good. You just don't want it in the morning, unless there's a few corner cases you might want to do it.
Let's say you're having your 2 p.m. meal and you get some steak, you put some butter on it, and now you're going to eat. That's going to be your meal of the day or your last meal of the day.
And probably some veggies too, if you're like most people.
How many calories is the average person eating in that meal or per day, doing intermittent fasting?
The good news is it doesn't really matter. How much do you weigh?
I weigh 150.
Okay, got it. I'm about 210 right now. So the average person would be right between us if we were the entire world, right? It would be too much food for you and too little for me. So you don't have to worry about it. Also, did you work out today?
I do push-ups every morning. So I don't know if that's
Okay, there
considered
you go.
workout,
So,
but it's my
No,
exercise.
I don't know. It's a workout-ish. I did 5 pull-ups this morning, and I haven't done any squats yet. So there you go. Right. But what I'm saying here is 50% of the calories that your body burns today are from respiration and room temperature. And then there's, did you exercise, right? And how much did you sleep? And how inflamed are you? What's your body temperature? All that kind of stuff. So the number is random. I have a $26,000 device downstairs, the ones we use from Upgrade Labs, that will measure my basal metabolic rate. For me, it's 2,990 calories a day is what my body will burn. So that's what I would eat during my eating window. I don't think yours would be the same just because we're different people, right? So most of us are never going to have that degree of it. You don't really need to worry about it. When you learn the difference between cravings and hunger and you turn down your cravings, you'll actually just regulate your appetite. Most people find they lose weight when they intermittent fast because they now have control of their hunger and they don't overeat. But even if you do eat more than you need during that eating window, you will still lose weight, or at least you won't gain weight the way you would if you just scattered that food throughout the day. So it's less about the total number of calories than the timing and the composition of the calories.
You know, another thing I really appreciated about this book was you talk about all sorts of fasts, not just food fast. For instance, you mentioned your friend who's doing a dopamine fast, or you talk about, fasting from abstinence, fasting from sex, sobriety, fasting from alcohol. And what is the kind of basic philosophy of some of this other types of fasting? And what do you do? What do you recommend? And so on.
The real definition of fasting is to go without. And most religious fasts, and there's a whole chapter about the history and the spiritual side of fasting. Most of them, you'd have tea. You wouldn't go without. But there's also a dry fast where you go without water, right? So even what is a fast? Well, the keto diet is fasting from carbs. The vegan diet is fasting from animal products, right? And those are all forms of fasting. What happens is that our body tells us that we need stuff that we don't need. It's just stuff that we want, or it's stuff that we might need in the long term, but we don't need in the short term. Your body also says you need a warm room. And when you take a cold shower in the morning, which is something I've promoted for 10 years, it's really a powerful effect on your mitochondria. The first time you do this, you get into the water, within 10 seconds, you have this like really heavy stress response. It's like, get out. Don't you know I need to be warm? The reality is that you will not die from a minute of cold shower. And if you do it 3 days in a row, your mitochondria will change the amount of cardiolipin in them, and they can turn on heat more quickly, and you're more resilient and you burn more calories during the day, right? So the signal you got in that first cold shower was, if I don't have this, I will die. Fasting is to go without things you think you need for brief periods of time to show yourself that you wanted them instead of needing them. And this is why a lot of guys, man, if I don't look at porn, like, something's not right. And they do it habitually every single day. Or if I don't pick up my phone and I don't look at social media, I feel anxious. If you feel anxiety when you don't have something that you know you don't need, you could try fasting from it. In my case, I actually was afraid of being alone. That's one of the reasons that I went to the cave. Like, all right, I'm going to experience 4 days with no human contact at all, because frankly, it scared me. Not on a conscious, rational level. Fear isn't rational. So fasting sets you free from many different things. And the hardest fast of all is something that I'm doing in this fasting challenge that I'm running over the next few weeks. And I've got 28,000 people in it. So we're learning how to intermittent fast. But the final 2, or it'll be 1 or 2 days, depending on how long people want to fast, I'm doing a spiritual fast. And one of the exercises is from the book. And it's fasting from hate. Most people cannot go 2 or 4 hours without thinking a bad thought about themselves, about another person, or another thing. All of those bad thoughts are that first F word, fear. It's just your automated defense systems looking for threats. And you label them as bad. Look at all these idiots, all that voice in your head. You can fast from that. You can say, all right, I'm just going to sit there and I'm not going to do that stuff because I don't need to do it. And it's showing yourself what you want versus need.
I mean, fasting from that requires a certain almost meditative sort of ability, which is noticing what you're thinking in real time. Often people kind of go down a rabbit hole, or I say people, me, goes down a rabbit hole of hate. Like I think of somebody who wronged me, and then I'm thinking of my response if I were to re-respond, and you have to kind of notice that this is what you're doing, and then pull out. And that's, I guess, getting practice of that muscle.
Is that any different than noticing that you're hungry when you know that you don't need food?
Yeah, I guess most people don't notice that they're hungry; they just eat. And again, I mean me.
One of the things, I didn't write much about this in Fast This Way, but I probably should have, is right now I'm using this thing. It's a continuous glucose monitor. Normally you have the sticker on here from Levels, but I don't need the sticker. So you stick it on your arm and it measures your blood sugar. So you can wave your phone over your arm and it tells you how much energy is in your blood. Now, if I get really hungry and I wave my phone over my arm and it says my blood sugar is 80, it's relatively low. But I'm probably have some ketones present. It's not crazy low. And I'm happy with that. But if it says my blood sugar is 65, which is pretty darn low, I probably actually, it's a good time to eat, right? Now, if I get hungry and my blood sugar is 120, well, there's plenty of energy available in my body. My body is telling me I'm hungry. But what it really means is that it is not taking the energy that is already in the body. And that means I'm going to wait. I'm going to say, body, could you use the energy you have before I put more in there? So you can actually get a very tight sense of, wow, which hunger is hunger, which hunger is actually boredom, or is a craving? And they're just different things. Or which one is anxiety? Which one is stress? Which one is loneliness? They drive you to eat so you won't have to feel the feelings.
So let's say you're out with some friends and it's 6 o'clock and you meet everybody at a restaurant and people are drinking and they're ordering food. What do? Your brain is probably telling you you need to drink and order food like the other members of your tribe.
I like San Pellegrino with lime. That works really well. It looks all alcoholic because it's got lime in there. So, you're one of the cool kids. If you find that you go out drinking regularly and you measure your sleep or you measure your blood sugar or you just look at cravings, have a couple glasses of wine and then wake up the next morning and see how good that intermittent fast is, see how good the morning is. Your sleep quality will always go down when you drink. You can do stuff while you drink that'll help you feel better the next morning, but still, it's probably not a great choice. And you'll just realize maybe I don't want to do it, or maybe I'm going to take the hit and tomorrow I'll have some extra charcoal in the morning and I'll, do all the fasting hacks and I'll be all right. That's fine. But I actually tell this story in the book where I'm in Kensington Palace in the UK, in London. And it's a dinner with a bunch of investors, and it's kind of it's a palace, for God's sake. So the waiters come out in tuxedos and they're bringing all the stuff. There's a guy sitting next to me. I was like, no thanks. I'm like, what's going on here? And this is the former CEO of Evernote. His name is Phil, and he's like, I'm doing I think it was a 48-hour fast or something. And he said, I've lost 100 something pounds using fasting, and I just traveled. This is not in my eating window. And so I'm just going to sit here and socialize with you guys, and was totally cool with it. And now what happens with this is really interesting because we all have mirror neurons where we're wired to feel other people's pain. Now, for most of us, skipping a meal equals death. So then they see you saying, I'm just going to have a salad and push it on a platter. I'm not going to eat, guys. I don't want to eat. I ate earlier, whatever. I'm just going to have something to drink. But they'll actually try to make you eat because they're feeling pain that you're not feeling, that they think you're feeling, because we empathize with each other. And it's really cool. So you can help people feel safe. And I had another experience like that, James, that blew me away. I was flying to Dubai. It's an 18-hour flight from Vancouver. And that's a pretty long flight. If you eat in air, you are never going to feel good when you land. Your body just doesn't have enough air and enough pressure to use food properly. So I don't eat when I fly, and I feel much better. I don't have jet lag anywhere on the planet. I do some other stuff too for jet lag, but that's kind of a magic situation. But I get on there, okay, first class Emirates. Fortunately, someone else was buying the ticket. This is where there's like a private shower on the airplane, and you can order whatever you want. There's a little mini bar. You press a button, it goes zzz, and it comes up, and it's nuts. Anyway, I go, I don't want a menu because I'm not going to eat. And Letty goes, what? Really? You'll need it. And no, really, I just don't want it. And so she goes away and she sends another stewardess over. And I said, no, it's okay. Like, I'm not going to die on this flight. I promise you. I'm not going to eat on the flight. I just don't want to, have the menu floating around here. And she looks at me and she goes, wait, you're Dave Asprey. And I go, yeah. She goes, oh my God, I have your Bulletproof Coffee up there. And I'm, because I fly so much, I have to do this. I totally get it. Can I make you a Bulletproof Coffee? And that's the only thing I do when I fly is I'll do one of those because it doesn't have all those other effects of sugar and whatnot. So she made me a Bulletproof Coffee, but she felt safe with me not eating because she understood fasting. What's going to happen as a result of Fast This Way is that all of us are going to get more respectful when someone says, I don't want to eat now. Like James, if I said, hey man, let's meet tomorrow and go to the gas station. Let's both fill up our tanks. You're like, Dave, my tank is already full. I don't need gas. Right? I'd be like, yeah, but it's time to go. So just put the thing in there and pump. Right? You wouldn't do it because it doesn't make sense. And we've got this strange idea that we all have to meet at the same time and all have to pump gas, and usually the same amount of gas in our tanks. Whereas if I'm breaking my fast and I go to that same dinner, I'm going to say, can I have 2 entrees? Because this is all I'm going to eat today. Right? And then people say, well, what's going on there? Are you a glutton? It's like, no, I'm hungry. Right? So we can just lose a lot of the judgment about that. And it's totally cool to hang out with people and socialize and just say, I'm going to drink something.
Well, Dave, this book was filled with nonstop information. A lot of diet books, I feel like, give a recipe or a remedy for, gaining weight and feeling sluggish and all this, but they don't really explain what they're doing, or the explanations don't really make that much sense. And like you pointed out, not every, not food recipes, but, recipe for dieting is for everybody. And this book really is so comprehensive and so informative. It should be the book on dieting as opposed to all these other BS things that are out there. So I appreciate you writing this. I appreciate all the times you've been on the podcast. I've had
Thanks, James.
You've been on the podcast since 2014. I always remember, even now, I remember all of our podcasts because I always have strong takeaways and things that changed my life. And I feel like podcast is not worth it to me unless it's going to change my life. I'm not in this to just kind of transmit information. I want my life to be better. That's how I get to call people up and have them on my podcast who are going to make my life better. And this podcast is definitely doing the trick. This is an excellent book. Fast This Way, and the subtitle is Burn Fat, Heal Inflammation, and Eat Like the High-Performing Human You Were Meant to Be. Dave Asprey. And just one last question. What's the best thing you would recommend for if you want to boost brain power?
Sleep.
Yeah?
And intermittent fasting are the 2 biggest things. They're both free. If you get better at sleeping and you don't eat all the time, your brain will work better. And if you're looking for a short term, I need to rock right now, and I don't care about long-term consequences, this is going to make everybody mad. All right. Bulletproof Coffee, 2 tablespoons of sugar.
Because
put it in there too.
Because the sugar will have a little bit of a spike.
Short term, a glucose spike is shown in lots of studies to increase brain power for a short period. So does caffeine, and so does the MCT oil that's in there. So for that 2-hour window when you just need to absolutely rock it, you will have full power glucose, full power ketones, and caffeine and coffee power behind that. And you'll be a great golden god, and you'll hate yourself later.
Excellent. I like hating myself later, so I will keep that in mind. But thank you so much, Dave Asprey. What was the website where everybody could find the foods and all this kind of stuff?
Sure. Go to fastthisway.com. Sign up for the fasting challenge and training. I'm teaching the book for 2 weeks. It is no cost, literally a video every day, 3 live Q&As. I just want people to know this stuff, James. I've written enough books at this point. So this is me giving back, saying thanks for buying the book. It's fastthisway.com, all the resources. I just want you guys to have these. Even if you don't buy the book, I want you to have it.
Yeah, and again, the book is Fast This Way. You can get it on bookstores anywhere or Amazon because everybody's locked down right now. And once again, Dave, thanks for coming on the podcast.
You got it, man.
The McNugget Buddies are back. But this time, they got a fresh look as part of the new Kerwin Frost box at McDonald's. We're talking all new buddies, dressed head to toe in the freshest fits, all designed by the artist Kerwin Frost. So when you order the Kerwin Frost box with your choice of 10-piece McNuggets or a Big Mac, you'll get one of the flyest McNugget buddies to go with it. Think you can collect them all? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving it.
At participating McDonald's for a limited time while supplies last.